13 years, BF, before Fluffy. The galaxy is vast. It contains 14 billion terrestrial planets. Of those, half are life-bearing. Of those, 1 in 100 are currently host to a permanent sapient population. Of those, only a little over 30,000 are crater worlds of sapient species. Of those, 1 is a death world. Light-year separate stars. The size and quantity of objects that can move through the void without being detected is immense. This was a lesson my polity, the Galactic Union, learned hard, all too recently. Around 20 years ago, we discovered that our society had been cohabiting the galaxy with another domain. This wasn't the normal first contact situation, where we'd find a species bound to one planet, maybe with a few extrasolar colonies. They had a territory that already made them the most numerous single species in the galaxy. Hundreds of planets and 1.7 trillion souls. And they've been hiding, right under our eyes, and yet, in the last place we'd look for them, on death worlds. Worlds where the gravity is high enough to crush our silicate bones. Worlds where wildfires rage. Worlds where winds whip and storms howl. Worlds where the plants are locked in the death game with each other, greedily monopolizing every last nutrient and ray of sunshine that they can. Worlds where even the herbivores are ready to kill, unprovoked, because they have to be. Worlds where predators stalk and venomous creatures lie coiled and waiting. Worlds where a single microbe would be enough to lay waste to the ecosystem of an entire garden world. Worlds where the very crust fractures and shapes against itself, rolling out streams of lava across the land, flattening buildings with earthquakes, washing away coastal towns with great waves. Worlds where the suns stream a constant barrage of lethal radiation to crash against powerful magnetospheres, only just able to hold them at bay, but still letting through enough to bathe the surface in mutagenic rays. And what had these death worlders to say of our garden worlds? The appropriate, sane places for life and sapiens to develop and inhabit? Unfit for settlement. The same self thing we had declared of their species' chosen expansion grounds. Their complaints? Sun too weak, not tectonically active enough, atmosphere too thin, climate too stable, ecosystem not dynamic, crop growth too calorie poor, gravity too low, could never support settlement, could never produce sapiens. We hadn't found the death worlders hiding in our midst, and they hadn't found us surrounding them because none of us were looking in the right places. And the worst part? They had spent centuries screaming into the void, begging to be found, pleading for anyone to tell them they weren't alone. They had found life. Death worlds are not dead worlds, but no sapiens. In frustration, they uplifted their companion animals, built AIs, resurrected long-dead cousin species, unsatisfied with their lot of loneliness. They changed it. If the universe wouldn't give them company, they would make it. Death worlds have always terrified garden worlders. The stories that come back with the few survivors are the stuff of nightmare. Death world sapiens have been a monster of myth for longer than there are surviving records. Hellforged bodies, hellforged minds, hellforged intelligence, and hellforged malice stalking you. The thought is enough to make the most grizzled veterans in the galaxy quail and cower. It was less than 2 months after the news of the discovery broke that the GU Parliament declared a war of annihilation against the Terrans. Death worlders couldn't be reasoned with. Death worlders couldn't be placated. Death worlders would not stop until they had brought death to us all, they said. 750 trillion souls marched war against 1.7 trillion, and were utterly routed. We were millennia ahead of them. Technologically, they didn't have nanotech. Their computing was a fraction as powerful as ours. They were still dying at the end of their natural lifespan. They lacked regenerative medicine. They didn't have FTL comms, didn't have FTL tracking or targeting. They didn't even have proper translators. Despite having thousands of languages, they relied instead on a culture of polyglottalism. In the face of all that, they humiliated us. The casualty disparity was immense. Hundreds of us died for every one of them we killed. When we sent elite units, composed of some of the very first hypercarnivorous sapiens, their ferocity paled in comparison to that of death worlders. When we tried to make use of our tech edge, they would reverse engineer it, our millennia of engineering, by the very next time we fought them. When we spun up the engines of our industry, they spun up faster. On the rare occasions that we would capture one alive, They would tear through the containments we had assembled as if they were made of tinfoil and proceed to rampage through our ranks. Terran children and pets lay waste to battalions when we tried to take their worlds with ground forces. We attempted to glass their planets and they stopped us. They always stopped us, like they knew what we were thinking before we thought it. Almost none of the Terran casualties were planet-side. Over 99% were void-side. That was my domain. Fresh out of officer training at 16 years old, I took to the stars in the Starfighter. Requirely are some of the only sapiens that have the instincts for dogfighting, and we are undoubtedly the best. Or we were. Human fighters outstripped us to the point that precognition seemed the only plausible explanation. In the year that I served, I didn't manage to shoot down a single one of them, but unlike 9/10 of my classmates, I survived. I watched and retreated with the GU forces as the Terrans pushed us back and back, taking and occupying planet after planet. We wept for the poor souls lost to Terran occupation, the barbarism, the carnage, the atrocities, the brutalities, the care, the empathy, the kindness. Video after video after testimonial after undeniable piece of evidence came from those occupied worlds. In war, the Terrans have been every bit the monsters we thought they would be, and so much worse. But in conquest, Terrans in white clothes with red symbols on brought food, medicine, blankets, tents. They brought all the things they would need to tend to the homeless, the hungry, the sick, the cold. They taught us the word humanitarian. They taught us the depth of compassion that must flourish in you when your home is hell itself. They taught us that we were wrong about them. They were such a lonely species for so long, and when they finally found fellow beings to offer a hand of friendship, we recoiled in horror and tried to exterminate them. We were the monsters. After 7 years of war, after 20 trillion, 2.7% GU dead, and only 70 billion, 4% Terran dead, we capitulated. We surrendered. We invited a Terran delegation to the GU Parliament to discuss the terms of our surrender. The best we were hoping for was that the Terrans would declare themselves our overlords and force us to give them everything we had to give, to repay them for the heartache we had caused. The galaxy watched with bated breath as the broadcast was made of the peace conference. Into the Parliament strode the United Terran Coalition's representative, backed by 4 bodyguards. It was such a strange sight to see Terrans in their people's formal wear. We were used to images of them in battle armour and, as of late, white and red uniforms. It drove home again that these were people, not monsters. She sat, and what followed was the most furious dressing down of a room full of powerful people that likely ever has or ever will occur. Xenophobia, genocide, bigotry, war crime, crime against peace, and fucking were all words and concepts introduced to the non-Death World galaxy that day. When the speaker bravely asked if the Terrans intended to seize control of the GU and turn it into their own expanded territory, she scoffed and answered that they weren't orcs, and they weren't imperialists. 2 more new words. Their insistence that they aren't and don't do any of these things is masked slightly by the fact that they're the only ones with words for them. With great care and demonstrating more backbone than I'm sure 99.9% of the Garden worlders in the galaxy would have been able to, the speaker asked, "If you don't want to rule us, what would be adequate recompense for this blood debt?" The Terran thought for a long while before answering. "We don't want anyone else to die. Enough of us, and Christ, enough of you, have died. You made us slaughter more than 10 times our total population just to survive. You can atone by first telling us that you're sorry, then showing us that you're sorry. You can make this up to us by treating us as equals. You can make this up to us by ensuring that this never happens again. The next time you discover beings that frighten you, we'll be here to make sure you extend the olive branch first, and then don't bludgeon them with it. We can forget about blood debts and focus on healing and transforming things so that nothing like this is ever possible again." Over the coming months, the Terrans took their seat in the Parliament and negotiations on reparations began. The GU gave a formal apology for their slaughter, and so did the UTC, which no one was expecting. The Office of Death World Relations was established to search for any new Death World sapiens and mediate with the ones already known. It was scrupulously staffed with 50% Terrans and 50% Garden Worlders. Against their protest, the Terrans were given exclusive settlement rights to all the galaxy's hundreds of thousands of Death Worlds. It was a hollow gesture. They weren't really asked to give. We may control the space around them, but those planets were so hostile to us that we never would have been able to develop them ourselves. Like giving water to a fish was the analogy the Terrans used. It got the point across after some translation struggles. They rightfully also pointed out that if they settled all these worlds, any future Death Worlders would be left out in the cold, So, unbidden, they announced a regiment that saw a portion of Death World was left unsettled for any future Death Worlders, and ensured the preservation of any local ecosystem for worlds they did settle. We share technology, innovations, medicine, philosophy, law, and we've both learned so much. The results have been better than anyone could have hoped. And yet, it's been 14 years since the peace, and while hostilities have not resumed, the Terrans describe the current state of affairs with words like apartheid and Cold War. Separated by planetary classification, the Garden Worlders and New Death Worlders are barely mixed at all. There are fewer than 1 million non-Terrans living permanently across all their settlement worlds, and the number of Terrans who've taken to the stars among non-Terrans currently sits at around the same. Terrans have taken their seat in the Parliament, but scrupulously avoid voting on anything that doesn't directly affect them. We need more integration, more participation, more innovation spurring cultural exchange. There's so much to learn from Death Worlds and Death Worlders. Death World research has yielded uncountable new improvements to the galaxy's quality of life, but Death Worlds being Death Worlds and Death Worlders being so rare and guarded in wider space, there have been numerous instances of researchers being sent to Death Worlds without a Terran because none could be found. The results were predictable. That's why, mere months ago, the GU declared that a Terran escort was obligatory on Death World expeditions and requested the Office of Death World Relations to draw up requirements for a qualification that will come into effect in the next few years. That being done, all that was required was someone to negotiate the establishment of this course and agree to be captain of the ship that would be the first test case for this new Terran security officer position. Those would both be me, Taqual, 27th daughter of HFY Peak, who's currently stood on the shuttle descending to Hell itself, the home of death, Earth. Ma'am, Sha'anza has been making an objection about Regulation 17.4. It's making her nervous. I flap, irritably. We can't ban pets if we want Terrans, and we can't restrict the kinds of pet they're allowed if we want them happy. It stays as is. I look at the pretty male, holding a holopad with clear concern plastered on his face. Remind me of your name, soldier. I don't need to guess that he's a soldier, though definitely too young to have fought. It's Quark, Captain. Your clan mother hired me as your secretary and personal assistant shortly before the Bright Plume departed. I chitter at that. Did she now? Your woman does so like to play matchmaker. Listen, Quark, I'm sure you'll make someone very happy when you agree to life bond one day, but it won't be me. Is that understood? His face is unreadable as he says, Perfectly, ma'am. I avoid asking why a secretary would be on a surface shuttle to spare the boy any further embarrassment. The shuttle door cracks and begins extending out to form a ramp, allowing the thick, soupy Terran atmosphere inside. It reveals the roof of the 1,500 meter tall reception of non-Terran dignitaries building, located in a megalopolis on an island off of one of Earth's landmasses. An armoured Terran strides up the ramp, blocking my egress, gun slung at his side. If someone asked me to define overkill. He glances between me and my new secretary for a few moments before settling on me. You are Lady Taqual, 27th daughter of HFY Peak? Captain, yes, I answer. Do you have a gravitic compensator and an aerial microbe denial field equipped and engaged? He says, without apology. I gesture to them, strung on a sash, unnaturally draped across my chest. He looks at them a moment before seeming satisfied. I'm afraid I'm going to have to enclose him in a tamper-proof case. We've had some instances of Garden Worlders accidentally disabling personal welfare devices recently, and the results weren't pleasant. This is now policy. The case will be removed before you report. Do I have your permission to do that? I give a Terran nod, and he clips a transparent case around my devices. Akaros, it feels sturdy enough to survive a bomb blast. That done, I'm shown across the roof, to a lift which takes me to the 169th floor, where my appointment is. I walk up to the door of Ambassadors Jian Blitz, Miyazaki, the self-same woman who stormed into the GU Parliament and berated the representatives like fledglings all those years ago, and EZ1026R583A, Ezra. Later. I drum my talons against the desk perch that the ambassadors have so graciously provided. It's unusual that I'm here alone. Terrans only do diplomacy from paired couples to paired couple. It wasn't always that way. It was apparently a habit they only picked up after leaving their cradle world, pre-contact, and it has become a policy since... But I'm unpaired, and the only qualified person who is willing to take this job, so they're making an allowance. I know that the skills required will require turning out a galactic arm to find experts on in gun world populations, But the Office of Depth World Relations assured me that finding these experts on Earth would be a trivial matter, I say cautiously. The mechanical man fixes his eyes on me and says, in a perfectly level voice, Captain Taqual, as my wife explained, it isn't a matter of finding instructors. It's volunteers that are necessary. A pause. None have come forward. There are tens of billions of people on this planet, I exclaim, losing composure. None? Ambassador Miyazaki turns her eyes to me from the window. Diplomats can shake hands, ma'am. Governments can issue apologies, but the people out there? She gestures out of the window. We can't make them forgive and forget. The fact is, they don't trust non-Terrans after your catastrophic mishandling of our first contact. Almost every single person on this planet lost someone to the GU's attempted genocide. Many of them don't believe you sincerely changed your minds about us and think that, rather, you just wanted us to stop slaughtering you by the trillion. And, if I may be so bold, the wording you had us use was off-putting. Off-putting? How? She takes her holopad out and reads, 4-year course at the end of which you will be serving under a Requali captain who has nothing but the utmost respect for Terrans and the restraint they showed during their occupations of the First Contact War. She tosses it onto the desk. That's off-putting. It sounds like you're still thinking of us as monsters. I spotter. How? How can you have got that impression from that wording? I do have nothing but respect for Terrans. Certainly I hated you, as I watched all my squadmates fall to your prowess during the war, but when I saw the videos I understood. You weren't monsters, you were lonely. You had reached out in friendship and we responded with war. I came here in a ship with a brand new Terran-modelled AI. I'm certain you didn't, interrupts the Terran AI correctly. GU law won't allow fully sentient AI, so it had to be modified to a state of semi-sentience. The only reason this rule doesn't apply to Terrans is because no one's been brave enough to bring it up, knowing what the answer will be. I continue. I feed my crew with Death World origin crops. I spent the last 5 months neck deep in researching your culture and history to be able to connect with this prospect, whoever they were. I'm here to sponsor a Terran security officer and hire them to my employ. How could I give you the impression that I think Terrans are monsters? Ambassador Ezra answers. Human beings are highly perceptive and sensitive of context, Captain. This is precisely why the GU has passed this law. Often what is not said is more glaring to them than what is. You need to understand that they don't see their behaviour during our occupations as restraint. That would imply that they really wanted to run amok, pillage, burn, loot, cannibalise, but were stopping themselves through force of will. This is not so. And they care for those whose worlds they occupy because that was what they wanted to do. Admiring their restraint is still fearing their prowess, not appreciating their humanity. You're just admiring the fact that they're not using their prowess. Ambassador Miyazaki smiles at her husband. Exactly, sweetheart. No one wants to work for a captain who seems to think they are a monster, restraining themselves. She thinks for a moment before turning her focus back to me. Even if they are, even if you think that, though I don't know why you'd volunteer to be the test case captain if you did. Plus, if you want a Terran, you can't treat them as just a Terran, you know. We're not a monolith, and no one wants to feel like they're only valuable for what they are rather than who they are. If you want them to save lives, you need to make them feel like you trust them with your life. If you want their loyalty, you need them to feel like they have yours. If you treat them as just the ship's Terran, you'll never earn their trust. They need to feel like they can invite you to parties, discuss nonsense with you. You need to be approachable, not just a Terran wrangler. Frustrated, I ask, So, what did you suggest? She chuckles. You could always meet some Terrans. Go out and get to know some people. Offer them a job once they've warmed up to you. She's mocking me, and it feels infuriating. You know what? I shriek. Perhaps I will. I need to be approachable, after all. I make for the door, and Ambassador Miyazaki is frantically trying to call me back. She knocks the glass off the desk with gesticulation. It shatters. Titan. It was made of stronger silicate glass than my bones, and it shattered. From a 0.9 meter drop. Wasn't even full. It's a good demonstration of why exactly I need the gravity compensator. Ambassador Ezra says, Captain, this is most inadvisable. With the level of anti-Garden World sentiment on Earth, we would never suggest leaving the building without a bodyguard. Almost sounding like he's going to express an emotion other than serene calm for a moment. I turn, fixing my 4 eyes on the warm woman and the cold man. Affecting a single Terran laugh, I say, Ha! You do tell me I need to trust this prospect with my life, and then you tell me to approach him with a bodyguard? Oh yes, I trust you completely. Never mind the 215 centimetre of armed and armoured death order behind me. I'm going and I'm going alone. If you want to stop me, do so. They know they can't. It would breach every diplomatic protocol to detain me here, even for my safety. My stupid decision has no obstacles. I stride out of the room to the left. I descend. I walk through the ground floor reception area. The receptionist wants to stop me. I stride past his desk out the door. I breathe in the air of a Deathworld city. I continue. I walk past the historic palace that once, centuries ago, housed the emperors and empresses of a Deathworld, maritime empire. I stride past that empire's parliament building. I cross a river. I pass an enormous monorail terminus. Occasionally I stop to talk to one of the lumbering Deathworld giants, all of whom are fixing me with the bemused expression of a father whose child has suddenly started expressing an interest in quarat hunting. None of them give me the answer I want. None of them are interested. None of them are interested in helping me find someone who is interested. I walk on. This would be much easier if I could fly, but even with the gravitic compensator, that's not possible in 2.1 GSG. Eventually I find myself at a dead end. I turn around to find my way barred by 3 adolescent Terrans with cruelty in their eyes. The same cruelty that we imagined was there in all of them when we declared our war of annihilation. "What are you doing on Earth then?" asks the, apparently, leader. "Oh, well, you see, I'm a diplomat. Sent to recruit a Terran to serve as a test case for a new rank, which could help foster a golden age of prosperity and the cooperation between Garden Waters and Deathworld." "No, you ain't," interrupts the one on the right. "Yeah, that's right. You're here to kill people, ain't you? Like you killed my dad? And my grandpa," as the lead one. "And my sister," as the one on the left. "No, truly. I've never killed anyone, even though I served in the war." "Ah, so you tried to kill us and couldn't," smiles the lead, cruelty white hot. I stumble backwards and trip, landing on the ground. The leader reaches down and lifts the sash off me, over my head. "These look valuable," he says, admiring my devices through the perspex. "No, wait, stop. You'll kill me if you take those." He smiles, either not believing or not caring. Then, faster than I can resolve, he's bleeding. I look left. There's a 4th boy, who wasn't here before. He's holding a length of wood that looks like it had been discarded on the ground. The next 30 seconds are a blur, as this new boy flashes between the others. I can't actually see him swing his improvised weapon, but I can infer that he is from the sickening crunches and screams of agony from the other 3. As they turn to run, the new boy grasps my satch and wrenches it from the leader's hand. The leader hesitates, but sees the copper-haired boy's menacing feint of his stick and the look in his eyes before seeming to decide it isn't worth it. My assailant's vanquished. The boy drops his bludgeon, turns to me, and holds out his hand. "You alright? Didn't notice him following you." I hesitate for a moment before taking his hand. He pulls me up and hands me back my sash. "Thank you. I owe you my life," I say breathlessly. "It's nothing. Those guys are arseholes. I know them from school. Saw them following you from across the street and knew they were going to do something stupid." I look up into his eyes, like emeralds, and say, "How would you like a job?" 4 months, AF. After Fluffy. 206 centimeters of Hellforged body, Hellforged mind, Hellforged intelligence, and Hellforged compassion stands 50 centimeters to my right, cooing over my egg in its incubator. "How long's it been?" he asks, with heartwarming smile still fixed on Tukak. "Oh, I'd say about 4 months, I respond, amused. His face turns to confusion. "Oh, really? Isn't that a long time? Secreter." "If you're about to compare Require to secretary birds, or any other non-sapient Deathworld avian, don't," I interrupt, still mirthful. He shrugs and returns his gaze to her, thinking. After a long time he says, "So, is that where you were when I went to Ateskia Free?" I chitter. "Just so, dear boy. I was recovering from Lane. I enforced a strict do not disturb for 2 days and emerged to find 2 notifications. Victor Taylor emerged with a Ateskian Merkbeast, followed by Victor Taylor hospitalized, and I ran to the medical room where you were sleeping, thinking you'd been savaged by 300 kilograms of dangerous local fauna, rather than savaged by your own loneliness." He chuckles at that. "How is the new Triple M working out?" "Hasayak?" I asked, remembering the 6 meter of Scarlet Reptilian, who recently took residence in Triple M after passing the Fluffy test. "Hassie? Hassie's great. Hassie's so sassy. We love her. She's a big fan of the Cuddle Puddle, but says it makes her a bit too energetic to sleep." "You're not apprehensive about sharing your living space with a venomous serpentoid?" He laughs. "Definitely took a little getting used to, but we're all friends now. Plus Cookie says her venom only hurts about as much as a bee sting, so..." "Wait! She bit Dwan?" How did that happen? His smiling gaze still fixed on my egg, he responds, Not mine to divulge, I'm afraid. You'll have to ask him next time you come to Triple M. I stare, disconcerted for a few moments, before I'm satisfied that, if he's not concerned, it's not something I need to be concerned about. Taylor's comm buzzes. He brings it to his ear. Hello? Toon's voice comes through, tinny but audible. Baby, get back to Triple M. Something's happening.